So next up, we're going to learn about an audacious plan to install 9 gigawatts of offshore wind in New York State. And I don't know if it's Mila Buckner?
Mila. Mila
Mila,
Buckner, yes.
Mila. I knew that. Okay. So Hudson Russ is the best law firm many of you have never heard of. They call from Buffalo. I've worked with them for years. They have some of the top lawyers involved in clean tech policy, and they have a history that goes back to helping GE get going. This offshore wind topic is a big deal. New York State is 9 gigawatts. They've been leasing out tracts of the ocean off of Long Island. By comparison, Indian Point is 2 gigawatts. This is 9 gigawatts, about 1,500 towers. And New York City on the hottest summer day is probably has a load of about 13 gigawatts. But Mila is also busy because I saw in your write-up that you are covering the cannabis business, which has just gone legal in New York. So I imagine you're a very busy person, which is good. Can you tell us about what's happening in offshore wind?
Sure. I started my career in California, so when I came to Hudson Russ, they gave me all the renewable, the cannabis, anything liberal. So that's how my career is going. But Tom, as you mentioned, New York is an excellent place to be looking at offshore wind development. The state has a commitment to develop 9,000 megawatts or 9 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2035. There's currently 5 offshore wind projects under development, which accounts for 4,300 megawatts, meaning there's still another 4,700 left to go into development. So this is a booming industry. It's largely being developed off of Long Island, along over 100 miles offshore there. So one important thing to know about these projects is you can't see them from the shore. That was a huge issue with some of the early wind projects that came to the US, particularly in Cape Cod and some of those areas. So we're significantly off the coast, but there's still a number of impacts and challenges and just considerations to know about this industry. I thought for today's discussion, it would be interesting to talk about some of the obstacles and hangups that we've seen in these projects so far. And I think the point here is that even these projects with sort of solid high level economics really need to pay attention to sort of the nitty gritty local politics and permitting and dynamics in order to succeed. That's really where we're gonna sort of see the projects be sort of the make or break, or things that will really tie them up. So the particular areas I wanted to focus on was sort of the state permitting process in New York, the citing and local approvals, and then if we can get to it, some sort of points to make about taxes and labor law. But to start, I just wanted to sort of talk at a high level about the state permitting process, which is referred to as Article 7 under the Public Service Law. It's the permit that's issued by the Public Service Commission in New York, referred to as a Certificate of Public Need and Certificate of Compatibility and Public Need, a CPCN. So all projects in New York are going to need to receive that approval. And I worked very closely on the South Fork Wind Project's application. That's New York's the first offshore wind project in New York. It's 132 megawatt project off of East Hampton. So I can kind of speak to some of the nuances that I saw within that. So one thing to recognize about Article 7 is it controls all permitting and local approvals. So rather than have individual towns or municipalities permitting a project, you have it all done at the state level at the Public Service Commission. So that means that you have a single venue where all stakeholders are coming before the commission to voice their concerns and frustrations with the project and really exert their leverage or trying to oppose certain aspects of it. So one of the most important pieces of that review is just the siting of the interconnection cable that will come in from the turbines that are offshore in federal waters through New York State water onto shore. And where that cable comes onto land and then sort of traverses up to a substation to interconnect can be a very hot button issue. for those of you who don't know or who are tuning in internationally, Long Island is home to an area called the Hamptons, and the Hamptons is full of very wealthy people who are not looking to have their beautiful backyards disrupted by a construction project or an interconnection cable. And I make this point to say that these communities they're very wealthy, they're very educated, they know how to lawyer up, they know how to participate in this process in a very pointed manner. So the Article 7 process is not a rubber stamp. It's very much a settlement period, a discussion. People are going through these projects with a fine tooth comb, and there are a lot of just issues that can arise. So one thing to point out too is that, you know, you have the Article 7 process, which is the state's permitting, but then the developer also needs to secure public and private rights to traverse the land. So for the South Fork project, for example, they crossed over property held by the trustees of East Hampton along the beach, and then also town-owned roads through the town of East Hampton. So they're going to two different public bodies to enter into lease agreements and easements and secure the actual real property right to develop the project. And I would say that's like a best case scenario. If you can get it down to two people, that's a great route that really simplifies things. But some of these projects are being faced to look at routes where they're trying to snake up and go to a substation, and they're crossing private property, or they're crossing schools and need utility easement. So every time you cross this boundary, you're bringing another stakeholder in who now has control over your project, who has say over it, who's standing between you and the permits that you need to approve this. And I make this point in part to point out that the South Fork Wind Project has set a precedent that people are going to need to enter into host community agreements, which are essentially agreements that delineate the benefits that the developer is giving to the community. And when I say that, I primarily mean financial incentives. So for the South Fork Wind Project, for the right to run the cable over the trustee beach and then through the town, Orsted and Eversource entered into a host community agreement worth $28.9 million. So that will be paid out over the 25-year life of the project. But that should really speak as an example to the industry. And NYSERDA has now put in requirements in their RFPs that HCAs and discussion of HCAs will need to be addressed with all communities. And the host community agreements can also get to different things, like if there's additional concern about environmental impacts, or concern about tearing up the road and repairing that and keeping that in a safe state, that will also go into those agreements. Likewise, the Article 7 process in general covers broader issues aside from just the cable routes, including the environmental impacts of the project. So another thing that's really interesting about the South Fork Wind Project is they've asked the developer to fund a 5-year environmental study that will look at 2 years of post-construction data, 1 year of construction data, and then, 2 years of pre, 1 year of construction, 2 years of post, for a 5-year window of what impact these projects have on the ecosystems, both marine and terrestrial environments, what they look like, before the project started and after. And I think that study will be a really interesting thing for the industry to go back to, and then sort of it'll spark this conversation within the communities. If we do find impacts, who's responsible for those? Are companies going to need to pay for them? And is this the study done by the South Fork Wind Project going to apply to everyone? Or are we going to need to keep reviewing this on and on? So that's definitely something to track in that project. I guess one other thing to point out too is the importance of commercial and recreational fishing along Long Island. That's a huge money-making industry for that area. And the commercial fishing industry is very concerned about these projects. So there's always going to be someone at the table and someone that these companies need to work out agreements with. And I think right now what we're seeing is a willingness to compensate commercial fishermen for work days lost during construction. So if you can't go out and run your fishing boats because the turbines are going up, the company will compensate you for those lost work days. But a bigger question in the industry is, okay, what if these projects start to change the migration patterns of fish? What if we start to see disruption in the ecosystem? Who's responsible? What does that mean? So there's sort of these like lingering questions that will become increasingly controversial as we see the outer continental shelf along East Hampton developed. I guess some other thoughts that are circulating with these projects is also the potential that the cable could become exposed. So for those of you who are tracking offshore wind development in the United States, the Block Island Wind Project was a project off of Massachusetts that was very much a pilot project and one of the first along the East Coast. And the cable there actually, over time, because of erosion and shifting sand, became exposed to people who are swimming along the beach. And so that's obviously very upsetting for these communities. You don't want to go to the Hamptons and have a giant interconnection cable floating along in the ocean. So making sure that when you permit these projects, the construction plans that are approved prevent that from happening, and then going a step further and making sure certain bonds are posted and assurances are made by the developer that if that were to happen, it would be immediately fixed and there's money set aside to pay for it and that sort of thing. So that's another hot issue for the industry.